Yes, Spurs fans, welcome back to the Irish Hotspur here. Connor Gallagher is in through the door, and Thomas Frank is still in the door by the looks of things. We'll be chatting about both of those, with Connor Gallagher coming in as a potential Bentancur replacement. Is he a similar player to Bentancur? Are people jumping up and cheering because of how much he's weirdly become, in my opinion, one of the most hated players, it seems like, in the squad? So I wonder if people are relieved and happy to see someone like Gallagher come in to give something different to Bentancur, or will he be very similar? We'll be chatting about what that sort of signing means for the team, the tactics, the structure, all that type of good stuff. And then, of course, as always, with the way things have been going under Spurs, we will be chatting a little bit about Thomas Frank, whether you think it's the time to bring in a caretaker manager, potentially just to see something better. That's kind of where I'm at on things. I just don't see how it can really get that much worse in terms of team form and the form in general from this side. Could a caretaker manager come in and at least give us something maybe to potentially get behind? It'd be nice just to be inside the top 10. Probably then I'd be complaining a little bit less. But we have Billy back in with us. Billy joked to me saying, I will be back with you guys next week, but hopefully Thomas Frank won't be. Unfortunately, we weren't delivered that good news there, Billy. Thomas Frank, strangely, in my opinion, is still on the job.
Yep. And I don't know. We've had two losses since I was last on, I think. But again, he soldiers on. He carries on. He's like the unkillable man at the moment, isn't he? So we'll see. I don't know. I don't know how bad it really has to get for him to actually go. I'm sure if we lost to West Ham, then he would go. But I don't think we'll lose to West Ham. So I don't think we've got to worry about that.
Yeah, he's got more lives. He's got more lives than previous managers do, that's for sure. But we're going to get this show underway. We're going to be talking about Conor Gallagher, like I said. We'll be talking about some other things, Paratici leaving, Rodrigo potentially leaving as well, one of his signings during his time here. And we'll get things going here. Just want to welcome in some people. I see John Stokes in the house. John, I know you're on the Gallagher pro side and you're also on the Thomas Frank pro side. So good to have you with us. Have a difference of opinion. Logan THFC, good to see you as always as well. DB, hopefully everything's all right with you, DB. Hopefully you're mowing the lawn, maybe in the dark at least, while we're having this conversation. Hopefully we're keeping you good company. Hansy's in here. J Mac is in here as well. The one and only Wayne Bonner, absolute legend. And then Paul Connor is in here too. But let's get this started. Let's get this underway. Spurs are reportedly close to agreeing a deal worth around £35 million, 40 million euros with Atletico Madrid for the midfielder Conor Gallagher. He's expected in London today for his medical. The move is a response probably to the growing injury list in midfield, Billy. Do you think he's the right type of midfielder to fill the void left by an injured Rodrigo Bentancur and also, as well, Lucas Bergvall?
I think he's a very good comp for both of those players. I think he will immediately come in and be our best box-to-box midfielder. I think the problem is long-term, we've got a lot of box-to-box midfielders. You could rattle off a few of them: Bentancur, Sarr, Bergvall, Archie Gray, and Bissouma. And Conor Gallagher's probably better than all of those people. What I think, long-term is a problem. It doesn't particularly solve our midfield issues, and the fact that we're just replacing Bentancur for a like, and definitely a better like. But I still think we might have the same creative issues that we've spoken about all season. But I think it's a smart sign, and particularly in the midst of an injury crisis, and he'll immediately come in and make an impact in the first team, which is what we always cry out for in transfer signings.
Yeah, he's also one of those guys we've been linked with for a while, right? We were linked with him under Ange Postecoglou. I was joking to Dave, he's kind of like a James Maddison signing, like someone who we've been linked with over multiple managers. And then finally, he's been brought in. I think £35 million, 40 million euros, actually not too expensive, really, when you think about the market nowadays.
25 as well. It's a pretty decent age, isn't it? I think you could see he broke through quite early at West Brom when he was on loan from Chelsea at West Brom years ago. So he feels a lot older than 25. But I think, that kind of money for a 25-year-old player is pretty good. And I did see Matt Law said apparently that Ange spoke to his representative 8 times over the last 2 seasons. But Daniel Levy blocked the transfer, apparently. So there you go. We're in a new era, and we finally got over the line.
That's probably because Daniel Levy and Johan Lange were shaking in their boots because 25 years old, they think is like a 35-year-old player.
And an almost 6-year deal as well. So there you go. That's not going to be cheap wages-wise.
Dave and I were joking that Sousa is going to be one of the oldest players in the team at 19 years of age with him being brought in. I mean, Dave, what do you think of the price? I think the price, first of all, is not too bad. Even if you're not necessarily totally sold on the signing, I don't think we've really forked over that much money actually for him. I think we've gotten him in the January window as well, potentially on the cheap.
Well, look, when you look at the price we paid for Archie Gray, and the
Yeah.
experience you're getting and stuff like that, I think you can't really argue too much with the fee. But anyway, Tottenham don't dictate the fee. It's the January window. We're in need. Unfortunately, the selling club dictates the fee. And at the end of the day, what was being accused of the club before is don't care what the fee is, pay it. And they've done that here. And look, it's not a target that we've just plucked out of thin air. It's one that we've been interested in a long time. But I do think you have to understand, why we signed the centre midfield. I know there's been a big, large, flurry for us to go and sign more attacking players, which we do need. And hopefully the fact that we've got a left back in, we've got a centre midfielder in, now it gives us the next 2.5 weeks to try and work on getting 4 players in, which you would argue maybe puts us in a better position in the January window than what we've ever been in before under Daniel Levy and stuff. But we needed a centre midfielder in here, first of all. Bentancur's injury has left a massive hole in midfield. Bergvall, people can promote him all you want. He's been injured how many times this season? And when he's played, has given away possession probably more than any other midfielder. Archie Gray still looks like a kid in a man's world, in midfield. He goes hiding a lot. He's not good enough at this level for us to be able to start winning games, which is what we need. He's a sort of player that needs to come in off the bench and make an impact. And then also, for some reason, Frank doesn't trust Papa Matasar and he's still away at AFCON, and Bissouma's not a part of the squad. So we needed a centre midfielder in here. So there has to be that understanding. And I would argue the engine room is one of the most important positions on the football pitch, because they have to blend defence with attack. So you do need sort of an engine in there, someone with a bit of legs, energy, a bit of intensity. And I do think Conor Gallagher gives you that when you've looked at his time in the Premier League. And then also, you look at him. He is Prem proven, Jack. I've got notes. Played at West Brom, played at Crystal Palace, played at Chelsea. It's not like a project signing like the left back is Sousa. He's unknown. No one really knows what he's going to produce here, whereas we know what to expect from Conor Gallagher. And also he is homegrown, which I think people often overlook. We have had large problems with the homegrown quote over the last few years, and he will come in and help add to that in terms of registration for the Premier League and the Champions League. However, I do question, is he going to have an immediate impact considering he has rode the bench for most of the season at Atletico Madrid? He might need a run of games to sort of find his rhythm and his confidence rather than just come in and provide that immediate spark, which unfortunately we expect. And right now we need a lot of our signings to do. So I don't think it's necessarily a game-changing signing for Tottenham Hotspur, boys, but I do think it will help keep Spurs competitive over some other options. And then also when you look at it, he can contribute going forward. Over the last couple of years, or in his last season, he had more goal contributions than every one of our midfielders, bar James Maddison. So that's a huge plus. However, he does rank the lowest of all of our midfielders in terms of completed passes and tackles in the midfield. So there is a small bit of a trade-off when you bring him in here, and he will have to produce maybe a bit more intensity and up some of those stats coming in here. But all in all, I'm not disappointed by the sign, and I can see why we've got him and what he can bring in here.
I don't think he'll in any way stand out in a bad way when it comes to out of possession. I think he's always been regarded as a very hard worker. He's a guy that will press, get stuck in for you. That was the case at Chelsea. That was the case at Crystal Palace under Patrick Vieira. He was a guy that just sort of has that nonstop engine, that motor really just to keep always going through games. And I think what's also nice about Gallagher is, I think especially during his time at Crystal Palace, but also I think under Pochettino, during his time at Chelsea, he does find a way to pop up with some goals and assists. He's just a guy that does end up having some real end product to his game, even if we are going to have question marks about his creativity. He does end up having, I think, in certain seasons, some pretty decent goal and assist numbers for a guy that plays so many different positions in midfield. Sometimes you see him playing deeper. Other times you see him playing higher up the pitch. You could see that being useful to Thomas Frank for the time being, and maybe even for the next manager as well. I could see that being useful. I don't think he's someone that will struggle if a whole new manager came through the door either.
On that, though, when you look at the signing, it's clear he's been brought in here to maybe pair with João Paulinho to cover the Rodrigo Bentancur injury. Now, the big thing around Rodrigo Bentancur is that he couldn't get forward and affect games, which was a complete I don't think was the correct analysis in the first place. I think people more needed to look at what they were being allowed to do within Thomas Frank's system, because we seen what Rodrigo Bentancur in years gone by under Conte, and that when he was allowed to get further forward and affect games, he could contribute in terms of goals and assists and, attacking play. But under Frank and under Ange Postecoglou, he wasn't being allowed to get up the pitch and affect games like that. So what we get out of Conor Gallagher in terms of going forward and producing them, goals and assists that maybe has produced in year goes by, all depends how brave Thomas Frank is with Conor Gallagher, and if he allows him to actually get further up the pitch to be able to affect the game in that regard. Because you can look at that and say, yeah, that's a good trait to have, but if he's sitting back, just in front of our centre-backs for most of the game, how much of that is he actually going to bring to Tottenham Hotspur in that deeper line position?
Yeah, just on this, Billy, from Paul Connor, he's saying he might actually be one of the most impactful signings we've made in a long time. I mean, do you think he'll just slot in straight away into this team? Do you expect him to just come into the first team, potentially even against West Ham?
Yeah, I think so. Not only because we have an injury crisis, but obviously he's a more proven level of player than we tend to regularly sign. So yeah, I think he'll immediately come in. I think he might not start against West Ham, but he'll certainly be on the bench. And then I think he'll be rotating with Archie Gray for the foreseeable. I think Palhinha was, really decent against Aston Villa, so we'll probably start as well. And it'll probably be those three sort of rotating for our midfield. So obviously with Xavi in the 10. So yeah, I do think he will immediately come in, and I don't think it'll be long before he's a regular starter for us. Obviously, he can't play in the Champions League games that we've got coming up, so he might sort of rotate with Archie Gray in the Premier League games, and start Gallagher in the Premier League games and Archie Gray in the Champions League games. So, but yeah, I think he'll immediately come in and make an impact in the first team.
And do you think he could be someone like, I was joking to Dave about this, Kieran Trippier? I felt like when he came back from Atletico Madrid, actually looked like a much better player, during his time in Spain, maybe learned a thing or two about his game. Do you feel like he might come back a better player from Spain than what maybe we saw in the Premier League? And also, do you think he's made this move potentially get a spot in the England squad?
Well, I imagine so, because Simeone is one of the best coaches, of the modern era, and a really elite coach. And every player that's ever worked with him says, how much he's done. And also before that, Gallagher talks a lot about his relationship with Pochettino, and they're massive favourites of each other. And obviously Pochettino made him captain, so he's had two of the best sort of modern coaches in terms of player development that you could ask for there. So hopefully a really decent player. And then I think the main consideration why he would want to leave Atletico, because he's not on the bench for every game, like, some people have made out on Twitter. I think he's had 25 appearances this season in total. So, it's not like he's not getting any minutes out there, but I think he would want regular first team football, which we will be able to offer him. Because he is an England starter, he is an England player. And he's probably been in and out of the squad lately, and probably has an outside chance of being in the World Cup squad. But he's certainly got more of a chance being in the World Cup squad if he's playing in the Premier League week in, week out than, if he's sort of rotating in Atletico. And I don't think a player that's rotating in Atletico is necessarily a bad thing, because, they're a team that's always stacked with talent no matter what season they are. They're always, top three in La Liga, and, go deep in the Champions League wherever they go.
Yeah.
Also, usually when you move abroad, you sort of grow up a lot as an individual, and you might see him in that case, just in general, you might see a much more mature player sort of return here to the Premier League. I also want to add, though, just quickly, Jack, I do think it piles the pressure on Thomas Frank then to start delivering results immediately, because when you look at the signings we're making, you think Jose would have done fared better with this caliber signings? Conte, even Ange Postecoglou, probably all would have fared better with these sort of quality signings. We're not signing project players like we have done in years gone by. So signings like these amplifies the pressure on Thomas Frank to start delivering.
So that's Kudus, Moani, Palhinha, Xavi, and Gallagher that Thomas Hanks had in 2 windows, which is 5 ready-made starting players, which other managers under ENIC have just never had.
No, he would have killed to have signings like that, under previous managers for sure. Sam, I'm going to throw some of these comments at you here that we have in the house. Just want to take this one from Johnny saying Billy's absolutely on overdrive right now with all the podcasts.
Protest season. It's protest season.
Stevie D saying, oi, oi, boys. I've been Gallagher in for 2 years. Very, very good signing. Shemtan saying, hey, Jack and Dave, hope you're both doing well. Hello to Mr. Billy. Hope you're okay. And you get a very big turnout this weekend. We'll be chatting about that. Shemtan, don't you worry. Gallagher, good signing from John Stokes. Logan THFC, who sent in a super sticker as well. I think it's a metal super sticker. And he's saying, good evening, fellas. big up as always. Gallagher is a fantastic signing, by the way. And I think this was what Billy was talking about when it comes to blocking transfers. He's saying Daniel Levy blocking transfers, that could never happen. Sam, everyone seems overjoyed by the Gallagher signing. Where are you at on it?
Well, first of all, sorry I'm late. Traffic in East London was not the one.
It was the Gallagher.
I think that I've seen quite a lot of people actually saying that they're not happy with it. You know, our group chat's pretty conflicted. Personally, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm not like enamored with the whole thing, but I think that he's the right kind of player. I think in the summer we were looking at, I was saying we just brought in Kudus and we were looking at the distinction between whether we were going to sign Palhinha or Douglas Luiz. And my reasoning for signing Palhinha was the fact that he's a specialist for what he does. And where Conor Gallagher doesn't necessarily exceed in like a specific attribute of his game, where he does is the commitment that he shows. And I think that we've watched over the last 4 to 5 years, this team has looked less and less committed. I mean, you only have to look at any of the London derbies that we've played recently to wonder where the team actually ever went during those days. So for me personally, I'm pretty happy with him. I think that he comes in, he's going to add healthy competition. I would think that he's going to start personally, but he'll come in, add healthy competition. And as I said, that energy, I think people have been saying we've been missing Sarr's energy in there. And I think that Gallagher is similar to Sarr in that regard, that he'll just keep running as much as the game needs him to. But with Gallagher, I feel like I was looking at some of the stats the other day to compare actually Sarr and Gallagher. And although Gallagher's played, I think, almost like almost 2.5 times more games than Sarr, his goal record is like double the ratio, or his goal contribution record. Yeah. So for me, that's good. I mean, I'm going to say something that I feel like will divide the fans probably even more. I feel like Gallagher is kind of like an English Højbjerg signing, if that makes sense. In the sense that, like, and I'm not saying that in a negative, because like you guys know, I liked Højbjerg as well.
Yeah, I like Højbjerg.
So I feel like Gallagher comes in, he's probably better on the ball. I think maybe Højbjerg had a slightly better passing range, if you can call it that. Yeah. But I think Gallagher comes in and he'll just get what he needs to do. You know, he should be ready to hit the ground running. Maybe he needs a few games to kind of get back to the pace of the Premier League. But I think that you, as someone who came through a Chelsea academy, you know, has played the majority of his career in the English football leagues, and done well, I should add. I think that he'll come in and provide that. I mean, what is he, 25 or 26? 25, yeah. Like that? So that's a great age for us to come in. It's youthful, but with enough experience that can kind of rub off onto the younger players. And you hope that he kind of does show Gray and Bergvall a little bit more, add a little bit more to their games, you know? Yeah, he brings that experience as well. I mean, he was even, I'm not sure if he'll come in exactly as a leader, but someone with more experience than maybe other people do kind of around his age. I mean, he was there for that very infamous but very funny Chelsea penalty moment, right? Where he was the captain during that period where he was, you know, shucking off Madueke, shucking off, you know, Jackson. So I think there is something about Gallagher that I do really like in terms of his mentality. And also King Hoddle mentioning the fact that he'll want to make Thomas Tuchel's World Cup squad also really plays into our favor. He's coming in motivated to want to play games. So I think that's also an added bonus. Thank you to Logan THFC. I think we took your comment from earlier and also really do appreciate the support. Eddie came in straight away. You know, we'll be talking about this a little bit later on, Eddie, but we should take this now because I think you have been patient. He's saying Frank has shown nothing to show us. He deserves time. Ange gave us at least the 10-game run. Conte has trophies to his name. So did Jose. Frank has absolutely nothing. Throw this one to you, Billy. I mean, do you think Frank deserves more time? We'll probably talk about this a little bit more in depth because maybe the real question is about whether you would just take a caretaker manager to replace him.
No, I don't think he deserves any more time. I think, every passing week we're seeing similar mistakes, similar performances. I think the only kind of question mark you can have is, will the caliber of managers be available in the summer, and then do you give them the rest of the season? But I think for me, I'm almost at the point where I just prefer an interim in now for 6 months and get them playing some attacking football again. I think going back to that Aston Villa game, I think when you saw in the second half and they had a bit of freedom, we got some players that can play football. Just not seeing it under this manager. They're sort of shackled by his his pragmatism and his sort of reluctance to take risks. So I don't think he deserves any more time. Obviously, in an absolute dream world, Xabi Alonso being available would be a bit of a game changer, but I don't think that's a realistic option, really, sadly. So I can see, the club might be thinking, well, let's try and give him until the summer at least and see what reassess them. But for me, I think I'm not convinced on anything that I've seen that he deserves any more time. And I think if we were to do the unthinkable and lose against West Ham, then he'd almost certainly go. But I think he'll just about do enough to keep him in a job to the end of summer, unfortunately.
And to Thomas Frank's biggest fan, to you, Sam, has Frank shown enough time or given us enough to deserve more time, in your opinion?
The fans are going to be now. Every time I come in the chat, people in the chat are going to be like,
never let it down.
Frank's biggest fan. Hey, don't credit anything he says. No, look, I think that I said last week, if we lost to Brentford and Aston Villa, I thought he'd be gone. To Bournemouth. Sorry. I think that the second half was just about good enough at Bournemouth for him to escape the club's criticism. Because as I said last week, I feel like he's already been tried in the court of public opinion. If you look online, I feel like 70% of the fans that I see are leaning more towards Frank out, whether or not they're saying it like actually with the words, but with what their arguments are for like how Frank's performing. That's the kind of vibe that I'm getting. And I've got no issue with that. And I said to you, Jack, last week, if he loses to Villa as well, then we're out of 2 cups. The club wanted to compete on all 4 fronts. Then I can completely understand why people would be saying, Frank out.
Yeah.
Eddie says, Ange gave us the 10-game run, which is true. But there was all those arguments, whether it was when things started getting really bad after that, where it was like people were saying, oh, well, if he had started really badly and then done the 10-game run, would we be looking at it differently?
Well, when you finish 5th in your first season, though, it's not just a 10-game run. It's a bit disingenuous.
But I agree with that. However, we're only in January. And also, what I think people don't really ever mention, and I've only really thought about it recently as well, Ange didn't have Europe in the first season. So he had time to implement his extreme style. There was still obviously game weeks where you still had a game every 3 days or whatever. But in terms of time in comparison to Frank, I feel like Ange had a lot more time to actually implement his style of play. And after those 10 games, it only got worse.
Yeah.
Whether on like he obviously put on runs here and there. I'm not discrediting the whole first season, but I feel like it's kind of a common agreement that the first 10 games were really good and the rest of the season was kind of.
No, I was just saying I think Eddie's being disingenuous. It's not a 10-game run if you finish 5th. Look, I think when it comes to Thomas Frank, and I'm just sitting there like listening to the boys, I'm just sitting there thinking and. I wonder with Vinay there, he did persuade Arsenal to stick with Arteta through all the noise around him in these first couple of seasons and stuff like that. And I just wonder with Vinay, is he in the Lewis family's ear, trying to persuade them to stick with Thomas Frank, during this tough period. And like if you're someone inside the club, I wonder, do they come at it from a perspective of, well, if we're going to bring in an intern, why not just see if Thomas Frank can, get something going between now and the end of the season? Because Frank has talked about it being a long-term project. And, when you're signing players like Conor Gallagher and bringing them in here, and apparently Thomas Frank rang him, he must have been inspired by Ange Postecoglou, who got on the blower to convince Gallagher to come here. It maybe signals out that they still do believe in the guy to a certain extent. But I also wonder how much of that is down to inexperience. When you look at the likes of Chelsea, Man United, Real Madrid sacking their managers for being in way better positions than what we currently are, is it maybe a lack of ambition by the football club and a lack of experience in that regard? But when you look at the run we're on, 2 wins in our last 12, 13 games, I mean, that is sackable form. And I think, I think West Ham is absolutely crucial for Thomas Frank this weekend. I think if we beat West Ham, It's a stay of execution beyond the January transfer window. I think, however, if we lose, with the pressure now being ramped on them from, Billy and his boys and the crew over there, which I think, by the way, we'll get on to, I think is the right thing to do. With all the lines now starting to be put upstairs, if we lose to West Ham, Sky Sports did say during the week it wasn't quite toxic enough yet. We lose to West Ham, it will be very, very toxic inside there, and they'll have no choice but to sack Thomas Frank. So I genuinely do think this weekend is do or die, because when you look at the position West Ham are in, if they beat us, they're not too far away from pulling us into that relegation scrap, and the club will be forced to act. If we win, we stave off that relegation sort of talk. We cement ourselves from really not getting relegated this season, and it might be very similar to what we done with Ange last season, a marriage of convenience till the end of the season. So I do think this game is absolutely crucial for the guy.
That's a really dark, scary thought, Dave. I actually think there's something to that Vinai was the guy that preached patience and gave Arteta chance after chance after chance, giving him so many lives. So, Billy, what do you make of what David said there? That kind of scares me, actually, that Vinai was the guy that gave Arteta so much patience. Do you think he might just repeat the same thing with Thomas Frank? I really hope not.
Yeah, I think that might be the intention, but I think Arteta has shown over the last few years it's not really replicable. Like, it's just... I think, we only have to look at rivals Chelsea and Man United who've just got rid of managers. I think sometimes, if you're giving time to the wrong guy, you're just wasting time twice, kind of thing. So I'm not sure that we've seen anything. And I think you have to remember with Arteta as well, he obviously won the FA Cup at his first season, and he was playing in an empty stadium because of COVID as well. So it was really bad. There were no fans there that were paying to see it. So it's not really comparable to the modern era, I don't think. So I hope that's not what we're trying to do. I think if you look at those February fixtures that we've got coming up, we've got Arsenal, Newcastle, Man United, and Man City in that month, all in the Premier League. I'll be very surprised if we continue playing the way that we're playing, that we pick up a decent amount of wins there. So you probably look at a few losses back to back there, and if we lose the North London derby at home against Arsenal, that could be the level of toxicity that Dave and Sky Sports are talking about. But I can't see this guy being a long-term solution for our club. I really can't. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with it.
I'm in the same boat. Faz Radfar's come in, Sam, saying, I personally forgive Frank. If we were to beat Arsenal 4-0, would you be signing an apology form?
I think we all would, but I think we all would.
Just that would be our trophy for the season. But what did you make of Dave's comment there, Sam? That kind of just scared the shit out of me, to be honest. The fact that Vinai was the guy that showed Arteta so much patience. And I wonder if he's just thinking, I'll just repeat the same thing with Thomas Frank and it'll all work out.
I don't know if I necessarily find that scary. Like, I agree with Dave. I feel like that is, quite a likely possibility. As long as it doesn't get like too ridiculous. Because let's be honest, Arsenal have got a terrible fan base, and every time, they draw a game, they're a Arteta out chance. So you can imagine that their fan base was getting pretty vile during that period. I mean, that was like prime AFTV as well, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people have said they wanted the club to, like the higher ups of the club, to change the way that they look at everything, and not be so rigid in what didn't work for 25 years, bar 2 trophy wins, obviously. And then it's kind of like the first hurdle, they're going to back a manager that maybe people haven't seen the vision yet. I also haven't seen the vision yet. I don't know why I said maybe. And people are kind of like, well, why aren't we just sacking him? And it's like, well, to me, that we're trying the club is trying out a new approach. They want to give him a chance to implement. And as Dave said at the end of it, I feel like it is a marriage of convenience. There isn't really anyone else. I think the fact that so many big teams as well have either sacked or are potentially going to sack their manager in the coming months. I think the club's kind of scared that we'd end up in a position where, especially around January, we'd end up in a position where managers were turning us down. And then as a transfer target, I'd be looking at Spurs being like, they've just sacked their manager having played awful football and they can't get anyone else in. Why would I go there? Yeah. So I feel like it's just not convenient for them at this point in time to sack him. I think that's kind of really the only leg that Frank has to stand on, based on how the last like 2 months have gone since everyone was saying, okay, he needs to like push on now.
Yeah, no, I see where you're coming from on that. Just want to say, if anyone wants to do a Faz Radfar has or MV Joker Davis has and get their thoughts in, ask us questions or get their opinions in straight away, feel free to do so. It does help support the channel. We also have a section at the end of the show where we do answer some of the members' questions. So do consider becoming a member as well. We're just going to finish off this Thomas Frank conversation since Eddie has thankfully, pushed us towards it. We were going to leave it for a little bit later, but he probably rightfully so just wants to get it over and done with right now. Just going to ask you this one, Dave. Do you think that Thomas Frank has been let down by the board like previous managers have, or do you think he's more responsible for how this season has gone? And would you bring in a caretaker manager right now?
I think you have to put more. I think Frank has to take more responsibility maybe than other managers. And I think there's a few reasons why. I'll be fair to the guy. Could we have done a lot more in the summer? Yes. And I said that when the window closed. I remember my closing words on the last stream we done in the January or the summer transfer window, Jack, is it's not what you do, it's what you don't do that comes back to bite you. And then words, keep playing in my ear as the season goes on and stuff. When you see the injuries pile up, the lack of fullbacks and options and stuff like that, them words just keep ringing in my ears. But, the reason why I say Thomas Frank has to take more responsibility is because I said it earlier on in the show. You think Jose and Conte or Ange Postecoglou wouldn't have fared better, or even Pochettino wouldn't have fared better with the level of signings of a Xavi Simons, a Mawani, a Kudus, a João Paulinho, and a Conor Gallagher. These aren't project boys that we have given a lot of other managers. These are players that have a fair level of experience at the top level of Europe. These are international players playing for top international teams, So, and not only that, we also gave them a coaching team, which other managers haven't been allowed to bring with them because it's been too expensive and stuff like that in years gone by. And that's why I personally hold Frank a lot more responsible for what's gone on this season. And I don't give him as much of as a free pass, or maybe that's the wrong word, but as much of maybe rope as I've given other managers because of these factors here that I have said here. And that's why I do think he needs to take, that's why I do think it's fair to judge him on what we've seen, because we have given him more, to get off the ground running than what we have given any previous managers. And you would argue the previous managers with what they have on their CV probably deserve this level of backing that we have given Frank. But of course, the board could always do more, and we should never shy away from that. And you should always keep putting pressure on the board to keep delivering more, because I think Tim Mann said it brilliantly yesterday in a super chat. The board only ever act in the transfer window when we're under pressure. They never actually act to really build squad depth and stuff like that when we're in a good position. So we can never take a focus off the board either.
Same question to you, Billy. Another manager let down by the board, or is Thomas Frank more responsible for how this season's gone?
I wouldn't say there's ever been a manager that's been fully backed by a board under this ownership, and even the new ownership. I would say, if you point to the last two summer transfer windows, Ange got Solanke and Archie Gray in the transfer window, and then the season after that, Frank got Kudus, Mawani, Xavi Simons, Paulinho, and now he's got Conor Gallagher in January as well. So I think there definitely is a trend upwards of signing quality ready-made players. I think Andrew only got one in his last summer transfer window, where you could argue Thomas Frank got four. But I think, Dave's right. There's always more to do with this board. And I've never had a transfer window feeling like completely satisfied. The question's over and this manager's been backed. If you look at sort of, rival transfer windows, for example, the Man United transfer window, this transfer window where they gone out and signed Mbeumo, Cunha and Sesko, you'd think if we had a similar window like that, you'd think, wow, some really high quality players coming in. And then obviously the funny thing is in football that even that didn't work out for Amorim. So you never know of these things. But I think Frank has definitely been given a lot more help, but I think you're also sort of undoing the work, the undervalue of the transfers of the last few years. That there's still much more to do, and I think the fact that our football team has been criminally underfunded for the last 5, 6, 7 years under this management and this board means that every transfer window there's going to be a lot of work to do still. So I think I don't judge Frank on that aspect personally.
Sam, I'm kind of in the boat that Thomas Frank probably does join a long list of managers that maybe weren't fully backed, like what Billy is saying. But I feel like he has been given more to work with than maybe previous managers were. But also, so many managers before him did, I think, so much more with very, very little backing from the board. It's not an excuse for them at all, but it just seemed like maybe previous managers with very little to work with ended up finishing 5th, 6th, 4th position. And Thomas Frank doesn't even look close to being able to do that. That's where I'm kind of, my frustration is at with him.
Yeah, I mean, it would be poor of me to say that I want him in because I feel like we won't sign the players that we need to push on, and he could get more out of lesser players, and then not call him out for that happening, because it has been poor, and I see the debates. The argument is, other than Van der Ven, can you name one player that looks better under Frank? And you could maybe make arguments, but not strong ones,
Right.
So he definitely needs to do better with what he's got. I think that in terms of the squad, whether he's got more than other people, I would say he's had more players brought in, but as you said before about if we only acted as a crisis, we also only sign players when we sell players.
Yeah,
I know that we've got quite a big squad, but you need what's the point of selling Brennan Johnson to bring in another winger when we still needed another winger over as well as Brennan Johnson?
We haven't even brought in that winger yet. We brought in Connor Gallagher.
Exactly. But this you know what I mean? It's okay, you sign Gallagher because you've just lost Bentancur, and you've also lost Bissouma because Frank doesn't want to play him because he's not got the right attitude. It's not, okay, we'll bring in this player, that player, whatever. It just, again, feels like there's no planning. I mean, today I saw some rumors saying that basically we weren't actually really looking at making a move for Gallagher this window, but when Villa had it agreed, we swooped in. Just a quick note on that. I just wondering how all those Villa fans are feeling, being at that massive club, way bigger than Spurs, that can attract all these players because they've played 3 European seasons in a row. Just wondering how they're feeling right now.
They'll still play in financial fair play, probably.
Exactly, as well as the Chelsea boys. I did try and call my friend earlier, but he didn't answer. Shame. But yeah, I think you can't argue on, I think, the quality of players that were brought in for Frank. I think that's definitely an improvement on what we had, at least 50%. But he's then also weakened, like other managers are also weakened, where you get rid of your top scorer. I know that potentially is Frank's decision, but you get rid of these players that are big players, like your Sons, like your Harry Kanes, and you expect him to. Everyone expects him to make it work right off the bat. And don't get me wrong, we're now in January, it should have been working by now. But I feel like a lot of criticism, it's at least in the chat from some members of our group chat, were on Frank after literally 4 games. So I just feel like the time. I know Billy said you don't want to back someone who's not worth backing. I still feel based on, I know people will say, Brentford are doing better than they ever did under Frank, but I also feel like that's because the Premier League is so shit right now. I mean, look at the number of managerial sackings. The big boys are less good, and the lower level teams have been able to, build themselves up to a point where they're actually competing more often than not in these games.
So is it less shit or just more competitive because the lower league teams?
I think it's more competitive. Yeah, I feel like I wanted to correct myself when I said, that's why I said the lower teams have become more competitive, because now I go, I know that we're Spurs as well, so we think this for every single game anyway, but now you go into games like Sunderland, for example, a newly promoted team, and you're like, oh shit, we'd do all right to get a draw here. Although personally, I did think we'd win, but I don't know.
No, I know what you mean by that. To be fair, I mean, I think it's only become harder. I think for any Premier League manager to really punch above their weight. But I think what's impressive is that you do see so many managers at the likes of Sunderland's or Fulham's or whatnot, managing to do that. And there's so many good Premier League managers out there at this moment in time. Just quickly, Sam, though, just as a follow up, and then I think we will move on from Thomas Frank. Just sort of a shithouse question in terms of caretaker manager. Let's say Ryan Mason is ready to take on the role. Would you take someone like him in, or a Harry Redknapp or someone right now in this moment in time? Or would you rather wait out for something better?
Harry 2.0, I'd go for it for sure.
I know. I've been saying it ever since he was at the Bournemouth game. It's just the only thing that's been on my mind is like, oh my God, like it would be so left field that I think it would work. Like bringing Redknapp in. Obviously, he's had time out of the game, but he's also had like 40 years of football experience. And he's not gonna. The one thing I think that reason I'd want him over like a Ryan Mason, for example, is the fact that like he's been there, he's done it. He understands what it's like to manage a group of ego-driven, multimillionaires. And he knows, he's been at the club before. He knows what the ethos of the club should be. So him coming in and just tearing all these, prima donnas a new one would be sublime.
Yeah.
I don't even think he would tear them a new one, though. He's sort of a guy that blows smoke up their ass. He sort of tells them how great they are. And that's why a lot of people love playing for him. I know Peter Crouch routinely says that about him, and other Spurs players that have played underneath him. And I think, if you were to go for a caretaker out, that's exactly what you actually need to bring in to sort of lift the confidence and lift the morale and stuff like that. If you were to go for the caretaker option, but something that I've been saying, and I think, Harmless Potato says it spot on here as well, that there will be a big merry-go-round of managers in the summer. And maybe that is why the club are maybe sort of sitting tight on Thomas Frank. But what I will say is the guy's got to start earning his $8 million a year, third highest paid manager in the Premier League. He's got to start earning that money very, very quickly to justify it.
Yeah. We're going to push things on to some injury questions. While people are in here, if you guys can for us, smash the like button. There's plenty of people watching over on YouTube at the minute, but also thanks to Billy as well and his following, an absurd amount of people on Twitter.
Got nearly 2,000 in house watching live. Come on.
So thank you guys for tuning in. If you want to follow us over to YouTube, you're welcome to, but thanks for tuning in and watching us, and do smash the like button if you are in the YouTube stream. We're just going to talk about the injury situation just briefly. Midfielder Rodrigo Bentancur has had to undergo surgery on his right hamstring and will be out for at least 3 months. How much of a significant blow is this to the team's top 8 ambitions? Can't believe I'm saying that, Billy. Some fans have even expressed frustration with the frequency of injuries right this season. Do you think it's still on the managers and their training methods, or is there something much deeper at the club? Because the fact that our whole midfield is out almost reminds me of when our whole backline was out last season under Ange.
I know. I think it's got to be wider than. I know, obviously, our medical team get a lot of flack, and there must be something in the fact that we keep having crisis after crisis. But I think every club is. You look around the Premier League, and they've got a crazy amount of injuries. The schedule these days is like unsustainable. I think the amount of games that people are playing in quick succession, particularly in winter, is crazy. I think it's probably a mixture of those things mixed with our club as well. Also, the fact that Bentancur has not been rotated at all recently.
That could be it.
I think he's had 3 90 minutes back to back just before his injury, which speaks a lot. So maybe you could kind of explain at that as well. I don't know. I'm not sure it's a massive blow to our top 8 hopes, which is a crazy thing to say, isn't it? Top 8 hopes, but that's where we're at the moment. Because Conor Gallagher will come in and replace him, and is probably better than him anyway. So I think that's a good, smart bit of business there to replace. But I think the schedule is just crazy. I know obviously most of the leagues across Europe have a winter break at this time. The Premier League has never entertained that idea really. So it's obviously something which they could bring in. But if you look at all the sort of Premier League teams around at the moment, players are dropping like flies nationally. It does seem that we bear the brunt of that, though. I know I did see a graphic say we've got by far the worst number of days missed from any players of anyone in the Premier League, so it does point to us as well. But I'm not massively too worried about the Bentancur injury, just because I think he's a player in the next 2-3 years, and even this summer maybe he's a player that we should be looking to move on from, because I think we can do better.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, sorry. Where I slightly disagree with that is, for me, when I look at Rodrigo Bentancur, he's better than Gray. He's better than Bergvall. He's better than Sarr in that deeper position. And even if you just want to make substitutions to be able to change the game, for instance, if you want to take Gallagher out, bring Bentancur in, and just ask Bentancur to slow it down if you're ahead, control the game a little bit, dictate the tempo, that's where we're going to feel that injury. Or even if you want to start Bentancur to start off that way, if Frank wants to try and play a more expansive game on the ball, that's where it's going to be felt, is just having that extra body there, that extra competitiveness. Like Conor Gallagher is coming in to replace him. He's not coming in to relieve him or or that. And that's where my issue comes in. And that's where I think people overlook that. And that's where I think he'll extremely be missed, because despite him not being people's favorite player, he does have a wealth of experience. And to be fair, he doesn't give away a lot of goals like some other players do in the team and stuff. And often he's our only midfielder that can take that ball in tight spaces and sort of keep it ticking. And that's where I get a bit worried about missing someone like Rodrigo Bentancur as the actual squad overall. Is I do think it will be felt, because let's be brutally honest, as good as we think Conor Gallagher could be for Tottenham Hotspur, as good as a signing many people think he is, what's to say he doesn't take the pitch against West Ham, pull up with an injury, and then all of a sudden we're absolutely screwed, because then you don't have a Bentancur to come back in and stuff like that. So, you know, just to say, people say it might not happen. Mason Melly, who only arrived on the 1st of January, is already having back problems, you know, since he's arrived at Tottenham Hotspur. So, you know, like, it just goes to show that, you know, you can get injured straight off the bat. So that's where it is going to be felt, is in squad depth.
You weren't in the boat, though, Billy, of celebrating Bentancur's injury like some people have? Like, probably some people go as far as to say this is our chance of breaking into the top 8 now that he's gone, because he has weirdly become probably one of the most hated players in a while, it feels like, at Spurs.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that is tactical, though, because if you saw those stats that were doing the rounds, that his progressive pass have gone down massively under Thomas Frank, and that's more of a tactical issue rather than a skill issue. You know, we only have to remember back to, you know, the Conte era, how good Bentancur was. Unfortunately, he's not quite the same player since his ACL injury, but we've seen him be an absolutely brilliant midfielder for us in the past. And, you know, his experience is really, really important. And yeah, you know, he does have qualities. And I think we've seen in the last couple of games, actually, Archie Gray has been struggling lately because of his inexperience. And he can quite easily get beaten off the ball sometimes. He had a pretty poor game against Aston Villa. And, you know, he has struggled lately when he's had more consistent minutes. So I do think we will miss his experience. But it's a good chance. You know, Archie Gray is going to get a lot of minutes, particularly in the Champions League. So it's a real good chance now for Archie Gray to really make that sort of place his, I think.
Okay. And Sam, do you have a secret Twitter account that you're hiding, celebrating Bentancur's injury like some people I've seen doing? And do you think it's a massive blow, or do you kind of agree with Billy that Conor Gallagher is a good enough replacement that we won't feel the injury as much?
Well, if you're going to go off what they've been saying, the rumors are that we're also looking for a progressive passer in the midfield as well. So whether or not they sign that is kind of, I'll be able to form more of a idea as to whether Bentancur will be a big miss or not. I do agree with Dave, though. I feel like he does have a skill set that the other midfielders we currently have don't have. I'm not someone that hates Bentancur at all. I think he has regressed, but, you know, once you've had, this is going to be his 3rd long-term injury, long-term muscle injury as well, right? So yeah, it's tough for him. He probably is upgradable, but right now he's probably one of the best of an average bunch. And I'm not saying they're average because they're bad. They're just not ready yet because a lot of them are very young.
Yeah.
I saw I think it was Paul Russell in the comments. I was thinking this while you were talking before as well. Not that I necessarily would want to do it, but would you think about integrating Bissouma back in if you didn't end up signing another midfielder and he comes back? I know that Jack's laughing. It's like, it's typical because it's like it's like the Ndombele thing, like fans saying, "Give him another chance. We've got to get. He's going to be."
The problem with that, though, Sam, is that kills Frank, because it wasn't a club decision. That was a Thomas Frank decision. No dickhead policy, and if he ends up having to bring him back in, that's going to absolutely kill him off.
It's a pretty bad look for the club as well, though. Like both ways, like him doing the balloons and everything, and then also if he's brought back in after they backed the decision to leave him out, I guess. I'm only looking at it that he does also have like a skill set that the other players don't have.
He's a great player on his day.
Yeah, exactly. On his day, that's the problem. We've had this discussion so many times on this channel. Like, when can he have a few days in a row? You know, obviously, thank God he was one of our probably our better performers towards the end of the Europa League campaign. But other than that, you can probably list about 2 or 3 games that he really excelled in, and the rest of them he was either poor or terrible by giving away goals. So, you know, I'm not saying like, would you bring him in because I want to bring him in? I'm just, is it an option that you could consider if needs must, because we don't do what we need to do in the window?
No, I see where you're coming on that. I think they would have to break bread or, to agree with each other, break balloons in order to come back together in their case. But we'll move this on now to some other questions here. Billy, we're going to chat to you about Change for Tottenham, of course, this weekend. They have organized a fan protest before the match against West Ham. Can you tell us what the aim of this protest can be, the time, the location, all the details? And do you think that the fan demonstrations can be an effective way to communicate some of the discontent that we've been having recently?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just tell you a little bit behind the story behind the protest before I tell you the details of it. So obviously, this summer we had a huge overhaul at board level with Daniel Levy leaving, and we were, going into a new era. The Lewis family, as they like to be called under PR, obviously the concerns immediately were, well, Daniel Levy might have gone, but Enoch is still there. We've still got the same owners, essentially. We have different people running that. Apparently the children of Joe Lewis that are now running the club. Lots of people coming in at board level, new executives, new chairman, new CEO and Vinay. Our intention originally for Change for Tottenham after a few protests last season was to give them a bit of a grace period to see how they do at the beginning of the January window and, see if this really is a new era. Obviously, the season has unfolded in a quite negative way, and we're now sat in, it's the 13th of January as I say this. The season is essentially over. We made a joke just then about having, our top 8 hopes. We're not longer we're European champions playing the Champions League, and suddenly this season has faded very, very quickly. We're now languishing in 14th. There's also a crisis going on at the football club. You've got the players fighting the fans after games, the crowd regularly booing off the team, the manager in crisis, the club captains come out and release a statement against the owners. It's just toxicity in every way you look. So we've been inundated with people that are messaging us saying, when are the protests starting again? The January transfer window, again, so far, there's not been any evidence of real ambition. I know the Conor Gallagher is a step towards, maybe a smart signing or something like that, but it doesn't particularly usher in a new era at the moment. So more needs to be done. So the intention of this protest is to let the ownership know that fans are really frustrated at the moment, frustrated with the fact that we're a shambles off the pitch, frustrated with the fact that we got into a January transfer window, made the squad weaker. We dropped points in every Premier League game in January so far, and we've also gone out the FA Cup. We've sold players in January, haven't bought anyone in yet when they've had months to plan this January transfer window. So lots and lots of fans are rightly very, very frustrated at the moment. So in order to put a little bit of pressure, what we hope to do is put some pressure onto the board to act. January transfer window is not like the summer transfer window where you can do a lot of surgery on a squad, but there is time to bring in some players, and Conor Gallagher is definitely a step in the right direction. Hopefully there'll be a lot more. We want to put pressure on them to do that. So, and we were constantly told that this is going to be a new era where the football team is put first, and all we're asking for is that those promises are kept. So we're going to meet at 2:00 outside the Park Lane corner, which is just outside the Corner Bin pub, right outside the stadium at 2:00 on Saturday, where we'll meet together with numbers, and we'll hopefully get some chants and banners and flags going. That will then continue onto the stadium as well, and we hope to be back to numbers. We've had incredible online support. We've had broadcast support in the newspapers as well. It's been on TalkSport and BBC. We've had unprecedented newspaper coverage as well. So we're hoping that all of this together will put some pressure on the board to hopefully act in January and beyond, because they promised to be an ambitious football club. But right now, we're in an absolute crisis again after another year of disappointment. Looks like we're headed in the same direction this season. But we just want them to fulfill their promises that they're going to put the football team first. Too often in the last 25 years, they haven't done that.
I also like that you're doing a protest, or at least, chanting inside the stadium as well, right? So I think you feel like, you can try to accomplish both by making your voices heard outside the stadium, but also inside the stadium.
Yeah, and that's something which we haven't done before, or we've tried to do sometimes. We haven't done before, and this is something new for us. But we want to make it heard on the pitch as well before the game. We're very aware this is a London derby, a fierce London derby, so the action does not continue past kick-off, because we do want to always support the players of Change for Tottenham. This is about the board and not the players at the moment. This is not about the manager either. I've made no secret about the fact that I don't want Thomas Frank to be our manager, but Change for Tottenham is always about change at board level. And we've got massive change in the summer. We were told we had massive change in the summer, but so far their actions remain consistent with what we've seen over the last 25 years. So we'd like to see that addressed.
And Sam, anything that you would like to add to this, or just probably the timing of it, I think is appropriate, right? Especially with, things like Fabio Paratici apparently leaving at the end of this window, right? Just speaks to the incompetence or just the mess that's behind the scenes. Like Billy said so well, even if you have your feelings around Thomas Frank needing to be sacked, that sort of thing, it does go a bit deeper than that at the minute, you know, with how much chaos there still seems to be behind the scenes. Even if it's a new version of Enoch, it's Enoch 2.0 or the Lewis family, feels like the same disorganization behind the scenes is still there.
Yeah, well, I mean, like as much as I didn't necessarily like the post, the sentiment of Romero's post was basically like, these guys only come out when it's going well to reap the benefits of everyone else's hard work. And, you know, I think that the timing of this protest is important because we're at a point where obviously we're in the middle of the January transfer window. We've signed one player. We've lost two, we lost three, two through significant injury, and one we've sold. So those three players are obviously likely going to be out for the season, which means he's now lost three players from a squad that people argue isn't good enough anyway. So there's obviously a concern there, and if this protest can ignite some sort of fire behind them that gets them to actually get off their asses and do something, and actually go out there and make the team what they say they think it should be and what the fans believe that it should be, then yeah, I'm all for it, you know.
Okay. Dave, anything to add to this for the protests? You and I have been to some in the past. I mean, hopefully we have a really good turnout for this. And I will say what's maybe different is the fact that there is going to also be protests inside the stadium, which I actually think is a nice touch to things.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, in fairness, I think there were Enoch balloons and all flying around, you know, in previous protests and that inside the stadium and that before. But I think it's the right move personally. You know, at the end of the day, we can't keep, I think every Spurs fan is at the point, you know, you can't keep burning through players the way we are, managers, you know, coaching teams, director of footballs, etc. the way we are. It can't keep going on like this. And even if you know, you don't want the owners gone, I still think you should turn up in terms of putting pressure on them so that they keep delivering. You know, I've seen time and time again, protests being organized. They know the date of the protest being organized. All of a sudden, a signing lands in, and it sort of kills the protest before it even gets going. But also, I would say, you know, I've seen this time and time again before, that there is a lot more noise online, you know, noise from fans around the world than maybe a lot more match day going fans in terms of willingness to protest and stuff like that. So, but at the end of the day, I would urge everybody to turn up, because at the end of the day, the pressure needs to be put on this football club to start delivering. If we all want more days like we had in the summer, that parade, you know, the right way to go about is keep putting the pressure on the board to deliver. You look at all the other top clubs around the world, you know, even across Europe, they all have specific groups that hold, you know, ultras and that hold owners accountable to keep delivering success and keep doing the right things by the football club. We are a football club that reacts to emergency crisis situations all the time that we consistently find ourselves in, rather than a football club that actually has a plan to build a way to bring sustained success, which people of my generation got into supporting this football club for. You know, my dad telling me about, you know, look, we're never going to win every single season, but we pick up a couple of trophies every decade, and they're always happy with that. And that has regressed under Enoch. And, you know, people thinking Daniel Levy was going to go and things were going to change. It clearly hasn't happened that way in terms of strategy, decision-making, progress, and everything else. It's still all very reactionary. So these protests is all about wanting the best for Tottenham, not having, you know, a personal, you know, vendetta or anything, you know, agenda against the manager or anything like that. It's just about wanting the best for this football club. So just bear that in mind if you are walking by and you are going to the game, just to drop in and show your support.
Yeah. And I know I mentioned that bit of business about Paratici. Billy, I think I saw you nod your head about that. I mean, why do you think he's leaving in January? Do you think there's some disagreements happening behind the scenes? And it's just so crazy. This is happening only after he was just unveiled in that video alongside Johan Lange, as if they're going to be best buds for the next 5 years. It's just crazy.
Yeah, so I think firstly, that was the new owners' not new owners, the same owners, but the new executive board. That was their first footballing decision that they made, was rehiring Fabio Paratici, and it's already backfired in the space of 6 months. So I think that kind of, speaks to the level of competency that we've seen under this new ownership so far. And I think people were kidding. Well, I know we weren't, because I know pretty much everyone said it at the time. But I think people were kidding themselves if they ever thought two directors of football were going to work, particularly two directors of football who have very differing sort of motives and two philosophies and things. And I think you can almost, I know there's lots of rumours and lots of support that suggests that Thomas Paratici was not a fan of Thomas Frank. He didn't want him to be hired. He wanted to be sacked. And then an interim to be brought in. He wasn't hired in the summer in the first place. And him and Lang do not see eye to eye. I think you'd have to be mad not to sort of buy into that theory, because it's just crazy that 3 or 4 months after being hired, rehired after a lengthy ban, he suddenly decided to shut up shop and go back to Italy. So I think it speaks to the fact that they're not seeing eye to eye. There's a Marcus Buckland tweet that came out a couple of days ago to say that things behind the scene, and he's obviously a journalist that works for across Sky Sports and things. So I imagine he's got some sources somewhere. So that it's absolute chaos behind the scenes. People have no idea what they're doing, and it just sort of speaks to the level of incompetence that the person that they chose to figurehead this in the footballing sense is going 6 months into their tenure.
Do you think, just as a follow-up, do you think Paratici leaving could have to do with the fact that they've seen to do everything in their power to wipe away anything that Levy had done previously at the club, and Paratici was a Levy guy, so maybe that's why they're getting rid of him?
Potentially, but then I also think if that is true, they also need to get rid of Langer as well. I think we need a clean break from both of these guys. I think it's been an era of disappointment. Paratici has probably got a better hit success rate than Langer. I know Langer's got some eye for young talent, but I think if these new owners are genuinely serious about being a step forward, we need a clean break from both of them and start again. Go and hire someone else. Go and hire a new director of football that's going to be everything, and start again. Because Langer was sort of promoted in that video, but he was effectively demoted because he just sort of went from being in charge of transfers to being in charge of youth transfers. So I don't think this was ever going to work. It was probably a silly decision. There's rumours that Levy had already agreed for Paratici to come back, and that's why it's happened. But I think we need a clean break from both of these guys now if we're really serious about starting a new era.
I can't believe J-Mac has done this, Dave. He watched back the interview. I don't even know if I could do it. It'd just be so cringe. It already was cringe in the first place. Now it would even be worse to watch this be like a horror movie, seeing that back now that that.
What I would say as well, I don't know if anyone, I'm sure people in the chat have, I don't know if you guys have. If anyone's ever worked a notice period in their life, you don't give it the full whack, do you? So Paratici is now effectively working a notice period for us to the end of January, and that for me is a massive concern, because I can't imagine he's full intently going about everyone trying to improve the Tottenham squad when he knows he's not going to be here in a couple weeks time. It's just crazy that this is going on. I don't know why they didn't just get this rumor came out 2-3 weeks ago, right? Even before January, this rumor that he was going to Fiorentina. I don't know why they didn't just get rid of him then and say, right, let's get someone else in immediately, because now it's sort of lackluster January is the last thing that we need.
What do you make of that point that Billy just made there, Dave, that Paratici might not even have his whole heart in it this January window?
Yeah, I can understand that. Everyone's worked a notice period before, especially the last week. You're sort of on party mode, aren't you? You sort of avoiding a lot of work and stuff like that. Well, maybe some are, some will always give it the maximum right to the end. But look, when it comes to Paratici, to be honest with you, I would rather keep him. I think Tottenham are actually keeping him to the end of the January transfer window because he's the one that can get in the rooms to get the deals like Conor Gallagher and exactly, your Simmons and people like that done, and that's why they are holding him until the end of the January transfer window, because if not, they would have just let him go to Fiorentina. Fiorentina would be begging for him now because they're in trouble in Italy right now to start doing business for them. So for me, I think that's why they're keeping Paratici here, is just to get into the room to try and get players of the likes of Colin Gallagher in here, because Johan Lang, when he was on his own, under Ange Postecoglou because of Paratici's ban, he was proven he couldn't get into the room to deliver them signings. We went and signed the likes of your Wilson Odebergs, your Grays, your Bergvalls and stuff like that, So that's why Paratici is being kept here. But I also would say, after January transfer window is shut, get rid of Johan Lang as well. You know, he has done, like, at the end of the day, you know, we finished 5th in Postecoglou's first season. He had an easy summer transfer window to deliver players of a certain level of quality that could help us kick on to be able to challenge across all 4 competitions. And he absolutely cocked it up massively. And he set this club back, you know, probably about 4 or 5 years in terms of even trying to get back up and compete for Champions League and stuff like that. And he has to be held accountable. At the end of the day, you know, Paratici undone a lot of Hitchens' mess, and it looked like he was getting us back into European level and competing at Europe and stuff. And then he got his ban, Johan Lang come back in. Now all of a sudden we're sitting down as a relegation sort of fodder team. So for me, he's largely responsible for that. He has to go. We know, you know, in years gone by, that director of football absolutely matters, because in this modern day and age, you know, we look at Frank and go, he's a manager. He's not. You look at any manager that's signed on since Pochettino and changed on to Pochettino, they're signing head coach contracts. Their job is specifically to come in and just get the best out of the group that is provided to them. They don't really have too much of a massive say in terms of transfers in that regard. It's all about the director of football. It's his talent ID, and he's the one that is bringing the players in. And the idea around it is that they're bringing in players more for the club's long-term success rather than chopping and changing under every single manager and rotating the squad and shit like that. So that's why director of football is important. Steve Hitchens set this club back, you know, massively with the amount of money we burned through, the amount of, like, you know, the talent that we ended up requiring. We ended up having to let go for free or taking massive hits on in terms of resale value and everything else because it was so poor. And Johan Langs is going to take years and years to sort of develop. So at the end of the day, he's got to go. But I would argue we should have done more to keep Paratici. But I think that's the Lewis family just wanting to read everything that Daniel Levy.
Well, Sam, Billy did say Lange was also someone that Levy had brought in. So maybe get rid of both in the long term, Paratici and Johan Lange. And what have you just made of this? The fact that, like J-Max said there, only just a few months ago, they were sitting on the same couch talking about ambition, driving the club forward, and now one of them's leaving. It's just a crazy mess.
Look, we said it at the time, you know, like Lange was sitting in that interview. He looked so upset. You know, he looked really demoralized that, you know, they were announcing his partner, you know, rather than him just being the lead man. I think I think maybe it was you, Billy, that said it at the time that they were just, it was a cowardly decision. They didn't have it in them to make the decision between the two. So they went for the easiest one, which was to have them both. And we said it at the time, like, they've been given clear roles, but ultimately both are going to have an idea of what they want for the other person's roles as well. And if they're not achieving that, then there's going to be tension. And obviously there was tension, in my opinion anyway, because we haven't necessarily seen anything be leaked about that. But for me, that will be why he wants to go. Obviously, also, I've seen the rumors that he didn't want Frank in the first place. So that's obviously understandable as well. And maybe he's been pushing, with the results being how they are, he's been pushing, saying that we should get someone else in, and the board are saying no. So maybe there's just been, you know, two heads butting together, and he's just decided that he doesn't want to be associated with the direction of the club. And look, I mean, that'd be pretty damning if that is the case, right? Because, you know, it's only 6-7 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, that we were, you know, one of the hottest prospects potentially to push on. You know, they said it under Pochettino, we catapulted way ahead of where we should have been. And they were saying we were like 10 years ahead of where they projected us to be by that point. And it almost feels like basically Lang has come in and pretty much undone the vast majority of all the work that was put in place before him to get us to a position to challenge. Look, we'd let our foot off the gas a little bit over the Jose and Conte years, and obviously with Nuno as well. But I don't know why I always seem to forget that he managed us.
Yeah,
maybe
I think we just want to forget it, to be honest.
Maybe it's because I'm still waiting for him to make us proud.
Yeah, one of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if he gets West Ham relegated, I would say that.
the long arc with him. I think we're gonna wrap things up there. I think there's probably so much more mess that we could chat about for next week. And imagine, hopefully, we do beat Nuno's West Ham. If we don't, like Billy's saying, I really do hope that the guy is just out of the job by that point. And also, Everybody, like I said, do follow Change for Spurs. We put that in a few times now, but we are going to wrap things up now with the members' questions here. We do have, since maybe you were just talking, Sam, I might as well put you under flame from Artist T here. He's saying Sam could be offered a gourmet meal at McDonald's a gourmet meal or McDonald's, and he would still sit on the fence. He's calling you out. I'm not even sure if it's in the form of a question, though. And then he says, Dave.
Oh, we lost you, Jack.
I think your mic, Jack.
Oh, sorry. I think my mic cut out there mid-sentence. And then he's also saying he hasn't played him in months, but finally decides to do so when we're chasing the game rather than when we're on top or have some control. Dave, quickly on Scarlett, and then to you, Sam, on him saying that you're a fence sitter.
Yeah, but look, I think at the end of the day, the options were there. I think when you're chasing a game, you have to go for it. But why didn't he take off maybe some more of the defensive-minded players? My whole problem was he took off the wingers that were supplying the opportunities, which was Matisse, Tell, and Odegaard, and he absolutely killed the comeback. He put on 3 strikers up front. He didn't even bother going long ball or direct to try and put the ball on top of them so that they could do something. And then we only put one cross in right at the very end, and that one was dribbled in. I mean, it was absolutely horrendous decision-making. But look, with Dane Scarlett, I've argued, and I think Thomas Frank also came out and said it in training, he's finishing and all is elite, but for some reason, not really any manager seems to fancy him at Tottenham or put their fate into him.
Sam, the fence sitter, any responses?
Yeah. First of all, terrible analogy. No real rhythm to it.
Well, he's also a gourmet meal for him is a burger with no cheese and no sauce or anything either. So
honestly, he likes cardboard with a slab of meat in it, charcoal, horrible. I know Dave likes a well done burger and steak, but
Dave's gonna defend.
No, but even I was horrified by that though, and I like RHT, but even that burger horrified me.
I don't even think that would pass as prison food what he was eating, and he was like, "This is the best burger in the world."
Oh yeah, that's anything gourmet.
I just wanted to say quickly about Scarlett. I think as much as I agree, I don't really understand why he took off Odegaard and Tell. If you were going to take off one of them, I could understand it. They're getting tired, but they were both probably our most involved attackers.
Yeah.
So I can understand. I will criticize him on that, but in the last couple games, he's also had to bring on Muani before half an hour, which has just killed his ability to make attacking subs when you've already got all your other attackers on the pitch. So I feel like he doesn't really know. And I think that's also a negative. He doesn't really know what to do now, because if you look at the last 5-10 minutes of that game, we had so many players. We had so many strikers on. We had 4 strikers on the pitch. Well, obviously Richarlison went off, but we had so many strikers, and it seemed like they didn't really know where they were playing. We kind of lost the momentum towards the end of the game. When maybe we could have pushed on, because there was no one really carrying the ball. It was just kind of let's try and get it to the screen.
Is my internet gone out?
No. Did we lose him there?
I think we've lost Sam.
Oh, see if he comes back in just a second. No, I still hear you, Dave. All right. Okay. Sorry, Sam. We lost you for a second there.
Yeah, I literally was just about to end as well. It's typical. Okay. Every half an hour, clockwork. Just saying, I feel bad for Scarlett, because he's kind of a pawn where it's is Frank throwing him in because he's doing the classic, this is what I've got to work with? And even if he's not doing that, he's still not really being played where he should be being played if he's being given a chance, which is only adding to people saying he's not going to make it because he's not showing enough. So it's a bit of a cycle for him, which I feel bad for him.
Yeah, I also feel bad for Batista and Odegaard, because I feel like they were single-handedly getting them back into that game, and then Thomas Frank almost sabotages himself by taking them out. He said, am I crazy for thinking we can make some noise in the Champions League? I'm not saying we'll win it, but we should fire Frank and bring in a good interim. If we make it through the playoffs and get a good draw, we could make a decent run. I'm pro interim at this moment in time, Artist. I just don't see it really getting much worse. I feel like we're at an absolute all-time low in terms of performances and results. So I don't see how anyone else could do really that much worse, which is why I am kind of pro interim at this moment. And I'm starting to think that maybe these players are kind of having enough of Frank. And when it comes to the Champions League, you could say, Happy Clapper in me would say, our form in Europe has been unbelievable in comparison to domestically, even in the Champions League. I know we've had a pretty easy run of games for the most part, but we only lost the one game to PSG, and you could say that was still at least a good performance for the most part, if it weren't for some mistakes from Christian Romero and some other kind of just absolute worldy goals, from Vitinha. So you could say that Spurs, for whatever reason, seem to be performing their absolute best in the Champions League. So there is maybe some hope that we could do better in that competition. And then maybe I'll throw this one at you, Billy, saying, do you believe a lot of our issues come with poor timing, moved from a stadium with a much better atmosphere under one of our best managers in decades, Poch not being backed in 4 windows, which was blamed on the new stadium being built. Ange came in at a time when the board refused to actually properly back him. He's just saying timing of decisions has been wrong.
Yeah, and I think timing is just an excuse for people that are incompetent, really. I think that just speaks to people that have no plan in place. Because if you plan properly and you're prepared, then timing doesn't really matter because you're sort of prepared for every eventuality. And I think there is, the new stadium in particular was sort of promised to be a game changer, but the game has not changed, and in fact we've sort of rapidly declined every year that we've been in it, which is a worry. And I don't think that's because of the timing of it, though. I just think it's because we didn't really have any idea what to do when we got to the new stadium. We thought that we could get by sort of not giving the managers enough money in the transfers by sacking Pochettino, which is an absolutely insane thing. Looking back, going back there, not backing Pochettino was probably the worst thing that we did in that time. But it's just been a succession of poor decision after poor decision after poor decision. So I think I don't blame the timing necessarily. I just think we're terribly football decision making has been really poor in that time.
And I might take the next one. He's saying, say we didn't appoint Frank, but all the signings we have now still occurred with a better manager. Where do you think we'd be? We'd be playing tonight or tomorrow in the semifinals, be one of the favorites to win the FA Cup. I just think this is where I'm at with Thomas Frank. I think what's impressive, and I mean this kind of sarcastically, is that in such a short span of time, he's almost already killed off this season where we have no real hope to climb that much higher in the Premier League, at least based off the current form. It would seem like it would have to take another manager to come in, clean things up, and sort of get us back flying again in the league. But then he's already knocked us out of both cup competitions, which is probably what the majority of Spurs fans were looking forward to this season. Challenging maybe around the top 8. I think that was most people's expectations. It's not really too sexy to say that, but I think that's realistic to what everybody was looking forward to this season. But then we wanted to have a real go in the cup competitions. And Dave and I made a big deal about how he lined up in that Newcastle game. Felt like he should have gone with a stronger team in the FA Cup. The performance was just so dreadful in the first half. I just don't think we really deserved then to go past Villa in that one, no matter how much we might have tried in the second. I just think you look at so many other managers in the Premier League right now that are doing much, much better than Thomas Frank, despite having far inferior squads. And that's where I'm kind of at with things. I don't think some of these managers I would even have right now at Spurs, but I'm just looking at all these other guys in the Premier League that are doing so much better with, in my opinion, much worse squads. I don't believe that we have a worse squad than Fulham. I don't believe we have a worse squad than Sunderland, Everton, these types of clubs, Brighton even. And he's making it look like we do, to be perfectly honest. So, yeah, I think we probably could be much better off. And then Davey's saying, is the main issue with signing these young players that we have no plan for them? I saw Lily White Lab make this point, but he points out how guys like Gray, Baird, Valsar, Tell, Odebear, Mikey Moore are all competing against each other in their positions and getting chopped and changed constantly rather than being understudies to an established player.
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem at Tottenham, that you don't really have any experienced pros that they can go to. But I'd also argue any old Tottenham heads in and around the training pitch or on the staff and stuff, I think is a huge problem as well. When Robbie Keane, the phone people like that were at the club, they had the Allen brothers and people like that to be able to gain information off little snippets. And I do think you need them players around because they're the ones that can provide you with that sort of invaluable information that having played the game, that they can provide, rather than someone that's just sitting there on stats and stuff like that. And I do think that is lost with some of these younger players. You always hear the likes of Robbie Keane and the phone, all some of the invaluable experience they got off some of the older pros around, but also some of the older pros that were now in the coaching setup and stuff. And I think that hugely lacks at this football club. But also the last 2 managers we brought in don't necessarily like using youngsters. They're not that way inclined. Frank at Brentford didn't have an academy, and Ange Postecoglou, everywhere he went, he spent massive amounts of money rather than turn to the academy and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's also a huge problem. I also just want to take this quickly from Where is it? I think here. Seekin says Dave calling Frank a frizzy-haired moron, which I do believe he is, and I think he is, to be honest with you. Shows he's only interested in I told you so moment, to be honest with you. Everyone knows my opinion from day one, but have I sat here and gloated about how bad it's gone, or am I happy about how bad it's gone? Have I sat here and said to everybody, I told you so? No, I haven't, in fact, you know. So I think that's a pretty... I don't think it's a very nuanced opinion or a balanced one there, to be fair. It's other people, maybe like Jerome, who came on arguing for my case yesterday rather than me actually arguing for my own case. At the end of the day, everyone knows me. All I want is what's best for Tottenham Hotspur, and I want to win games of football. That's all I care about. You know, even though I had my opinion at the start of the season, when things were going well and we were winning games, I was sitting here with shades and a bucket hat on. So I think that's a very unfair opinion, to be brutally honest with you. But yeah, move on, Jacko. Sorry.
To be fair, I have said that Thomas Frank's hair is amazing. So, Dave, that's one of the one things we do disagree on. And the only thing I would say, Thomas Frank, I think, does need a skincare routine because those bags under his eyes just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
And I'm consistent when it comes to hair. I don't like Radus. I don't like Bergvals. I don't like long hair on men in general. So,
yeah, Dave thinks the game's gone with the hair.
The chewing gum's got to stop as well, right?
It's better than eating bananas, I suppose, like you did at halftime against Monaco. I mean, it's like fucking we're being sieged like the beaches of Normandy, and the guy's walking out eating a banana while all the bombs are going off around him. It's insane.
At least I hope it's nicotine gum, at least to de-stress him out. Ryan, or sorry, I think this is Paul Connor. He's saying, "Evening, guys. Do you think Conor Gallagher is the start of a rebuild, and we are going to build around him? And do you see him as a future captain of this team?" And tinfoil hat theory: has Pochettino asked Spurs to sign him? And do you think Frank has had any input in Gallagher choosing Spurs? I'll hand that one to you, Billy. Be crazy to see Conor Gallagher from Chelsea Academy to Spurs captain.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't imagine so. I think, I think it would be part of the leadership group, no doubt. But I think, well, I mean, I guess it could happen. But obviously, if we're going to keep Van der Ven, who's already our sort of vice captain, then, Van der Ven is younger and will probably be here if we can keep him, even though he might be going this summer. And he's probably ahead in the pecking order. But who knows? It might happen. And then about the Pochettino thing, I'd love that for it to be true. I think... I know that he was a massive fan, made him captain at Chelsea at 24 years old. They both talk about how much they love each other. That'd be amazing, but wishful thinking, I think, at this stage. But I'm sure it's another reason why Pochettino will probably, another reason on the list of 100, but Pochettino would no doubt love to be our manager again.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for being on the panel tonight. Thank you to all the members for those extra questions. Thank you to all the extra support from Eddie, Logan, THFC, Fazu Radvar, and anyone that has joined us tonight. I think it's been a very fun show. And of course, under difficult situations and circumstances with Tottenham Hotspur, but we'll continue to plow through until things get better. We'll see you all next time, everybody. Come on, you Spurs. Smash the like button, please, on your way out.